My name is Avery Monroe. On the day my father passed away, I sat inside a quiet room at the law firm, heart pounding as they opened the envelope labeled Official Will. And then, my name wasn't mentioned at all. Not a single line, not one word. The entire estate, company, properties, everything was left to Jade, my stepmother's daughter. I sat there frozen, feeling like I had been erased from my own family. Have you ever had something you rightfully deserved taken away, just because someone else knew how to play the victim better than you? Have you ever sat in a room where your whole life was decided by a piece of paper and the silence of your own blood? Leave a comment if you've ever felt like the one left behind. Like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow the rest of this story, because I hit rock bottom, but then I uncovered a secret they never thought I'd find. I still remember the day my world first started to shift. When I was 16, my mother died in a car accident on her way home from a short business trip. They said it was heavy rain, poor visibility, the car lost traction. I didn't believe it. My mother was always careful, but whatever the reason, the truth didn't change. She was gone. My father never cried in front of me. He stood silently by the casket, hands clenched, eyes dry. I thought it was just how he processed grief. I thought we'd get through it together. But instead, he began pulling away. From everything, including me. 2 years later, he introduced Elaine as if she were some sort of cure for his long sadness. I remember that first dinner she came into our home. Perfect blonde hair, soft smile, the faintest trace of perfume. Everything about her was calculated. Her voice, her gaze, even the way she sat. She called me sweetheart from the very first meeting. But to me, it didn't feel like affection. It felt like ownership. Not long after, Jade moved in with us. She was 3 years younger than me, attended a prestigious private school, and behaved like sugar every time my father was around. "Avery, I really admire how independent and strong you are," she once said, right after she walked through the door. But just days later, I caught Jade digging through my mother's study, the one room I had kept untouched. "I didn't think you still kept all this old stuff," she said flatly when she saw me enter, her hand still inside my mother's desk drawer. "Looks like a museum in here." I slammed the drawer shut and looked her straight in the eye. "Get out of my mother's room." Jade shrugged and walked away without an apology. She didn't need to, because I knew no one was going to make her give one. From that day on, the house that once felt like the safest place in the world started to feel like enemy ground. Elaine suddenly became the one managing all household expenses. She replaced furniture, threw out the framed photos of my mom lining the hallway. When I questioned her, she just smiled. "Change is necessary, sweetheart. Nobody wants to live in the past forever." My father said nothing. He only looked at me and said, "Elaine is just trying to build a new home. You should open your heart too." I tried. I truly did. But every time I took a step forward, they stepped back, as if I was an outsider intruding. Jade became more and more favored. She started showing up in board meetings, even though she hadn't graduated yet. I was told to take a break and focus on school. One afternoon, I saw Jade sitting in my father's office, legs crossed over the chair, chatting on the phone with a tone I had only ever heard in high-end PR firms. When she noticed me walk in, she waved sweetly. "Avery, I was just telling my boyfriend you're the best lawyer I know. Think you could help me look over this contract real quick?" I stayed silent, looked at her, then turned to my father. He simply smiled and patted my shoulder. "Give her a hand, okay? She's learning fast." I took the contract from her. It was a copy straight from our legal department. And I understood. She wasn't learning. She was replacing me. Gradually, I stopped getting invited to meetings. The proposals I drafted were returned with no feedback. Word quietly spread that Elaine was planning to bring in a fresh perspective to lead the legal team. I became invisible. And my father, the man who used to sit with me for hours discussing legal terms and investment strategies, only nodded hello as he passed me in the hallway. I used to dream about the day he and I would run the company together as equal partners. But those dreams were suffocated in long, quiet corridors, in dinners where he only spoke to Jade, while I was asked to comment on the dessert. One late evening, I stood on the office rooftop, watching the city lights in the distance. Elaine had just been given control over internal finances. I had been quietly removed from my senior legal advisor role. No formal meeting, no explanation. I texted my father, "Can we talk? Just the two of us?" He replied, "Not tonight, maybe another time, Avery." Another time never came. 3 months later, he died of a sudden heart attack. That was when I realized I hadn't just lost a father. I had lost my place in the very house and company he left behind. And the one holding power was the same girl who had once laughed while I cried in my mother's study. After the funeral, I returned to the company instinctively, as if walking through those doors would let me hold on to some part of him. The elevator took me to the 14th floor, where he and I had spent hours planning legal strategies, merger clauses, and risk assessments. Everything looked the same, but as soon as I entered my office, I knew something was off. I typed in my password. It didn't work. I tried again, still locked out. I called IT. A voice I didn't recognize answered. "I'm sorry, Ms. Monroe. Your account has been temporarily disabled by directive from executive management." Executive management? I'm still head of legal. According to our system, that position now belongs to Miss Spencer. Would you like to leave a message? Spencer, the same last name as Elaine's attorney. I had never seen her here, let alone been informed of any leadership change. I hung up, my chest tightening, a cold shiver crawling down my spine. I rushed to my father's old office, now the chairman's suite. The nameplate still read Daniel Monroe, but I had to knock. And the one who opened the door was Jade. She stood near the desk, coffee cup in hand, looking completely at ease. "Avery," she smiled, "you're in early. I thought you'd take some time off after the funeral." I glanced around. No sign of Elaine, no senior staff, just Jade and a man organizing files. She gestured for him to leave, then motioned for me to sit, speaking like she was in charge. "What's going on here?" I asked, sitting upright. Jade tilted her head. "We've been restructuring the executive team after Dad's passing. My mom thinks it's time to streamline operations. Some departments aren't functioning efficiently, like legal." I kept my voice even. "So you quietly replaced me, locked my access, and brought in your mom's people?" She shrugged, setting her coffee down. "Not quietly. Strategically. Legal is only part of it. The company needs future direction. My mom thinks you'll find a better fit elsewhere." "I don't need your mom deciding that for me." She smiled, and in her eyes, I saw it again. That same possessive coldness I recognized from years ago. "My mom only wants what's best for the family." She emphasized those last two words. I said nothing more. I walked out. That afternoon, I reached out to several trusted partners, people who had worked closely with my father and me. 2 politely declined to talk. 1 texted back, "Avery, I'm so sorry. Looks like the company's going through a lot of changes. I've been asked to work directly with Jade or Elaine." It was as if I had never existed. 3 days later, I requested an official meeting with the board. I needed answers. I needed transparency. The meeting took place in the large conference room. Elaine sat at the head of the table, with Jade to her right and the new legal representative to her left. A well-dressed woman with dark hair who flipped through documents as if everything had been rehearsed. I stood up, my voice steadier than even I expected. "I want to know why my system access was revoked without formal notice, and why the head of legal position was reassigned without a single meeting." Elaine replied with a falsely sweet tone. "Avery, We're very sorry if you feel hurt. But the company is entering a new phase. You were once an important part of that, but not everyone adapts to change. I looked at Jade. She said nothing. She just smiled. The smile of someone who had taken everything. I turned to the other board members. We were once a team that prioritized efficiency and integrity. You all know I built the legal foundation of this company for the past 3 years, and today, I'm being replaced by someone who's never set foot in this room. No one responded. Only a quiet cough came from the end of the table. That afternoon, I packed my things. One of my former staff members, a junior assistant who had supported me in several major negotiations, secretly handed me a folder. "You didn't hear this from me," he whispered, "but you should take a look at these copies. A few contracts signed recently. Something's off." I opened the folder. Unreasonable clauses, untraceable payments, and unfamiliar company names hidden under vague service provider titles. I looked up at him. "Who do you think is behind this?" He didn't answer, but his eyes did. "Elaine." And Jade. My father had once believed that this company would be the legacy he left me. But now, it was becoming someone else's weapon. And I was being pushed out of the very place I helped build from the ground up. I walked out of that building carrying a folder full of evidence, a quiet storm inside me, and a sinking feeling that what I had uncovered so far was only the surface. Behind those polished smiles was a plan long in motion. 3 days after the will reading, still buried in suspicious documents my former assistant gave me, I received a strange envelope in the mailbox outside my old office. No return address, no company logo. Just a cream-colored envelope, yellowed with time. Its corners worn, as if someone had kept it hidden for a long while. I was about to toss it onto my desk like any other misdelivered flyer, but when I turned it over, I froze. The handwriting was unmistakable. Slanted, firm, and with the way my name was capitalized in a style only one person had ever used. My father. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a copy of a document stamped Fane Red. Preliminary Will, Monroe Family Holdings. May 3rd, 2020. I read each line slowly. Solaire, Avery Monroe. I held my breath. Alongside the will was a small note handwritten in black ink. Just one line. No name. "Go to the Lakehouse. Everything is there." I stood frozen at my desk, heart pounding. The Lakehouse. The small cedar cabin by Cedar Hill Lake. My father's birthday gift to my mother when I turned 10. After she passed away, it was left abandoned. I had never gone back. My father had never spoken of it again. I grabbed my phone and pulled up a map. The house was about a 3-hour drive from Boston, tucked away in a quiet pine forest. I told no one. Not the lawyer, not my best friend, not my former coworkers. Something in my gut told me I had to go alone. I left the city at dawn, golden sunlight casting long shadows across the I-93. The whole drive, my mind circled the same questions. Why wasn't this will used in the official reading? Who replaced it? And most of all, who had kept it safe all this time and sent it to me now? The wooden gate was weathered. The sign that read Monroe Lakehouse was missing the L. I pushed the gate open, my tires crunching softly over mossy gravel. The house still stood, its wooden walls faded, its windows dressed in yellowed lace curtains. I unlocked the front door with the old key I had kept in my wallet like a keepsake. The air inside was musty, thick with the scent of aged wood and moisture. But everything was exactly as it had been. The painting my mother had made still hung above the fireplace, the burgundy leather chairs still perfectly arranged, and the piano she used to play every Saturday night still stood in the corner, covered in a lace cloth now yellowed with time. I walked to the piano, drawn by something I couldn't name. And then I remembered. Beneath the keyboard was a secret compartment only my father and I knew about, He used to hide my birthday presents there when I was little. I crouched down, tapped gently. It was still hollow. I opened it. Inside was a small oak box, about the size of 2 stacked books. The lock had no code. It opened with a click. I took a deep breath, then slowly lifted the lid. Inside was the original version of the preliminary will, not a copy. It had my father's signature. The notary seal from the law office I recognized immediately. Tucked beside it was a USB drive and a small white envelope addressed to me in my father's handwriting. I opened the envelope. Avery, if you're reading this, I'm probably no longer with you. I sat down, clutching the letter, my eyes fixed on every word. I left this will here because I feared things in the family were changing too quickly, and you might not be protected as you deserve. I didn't want Elaine, or anyone else, to have the power to alter my decision once I was no longer able to defend it. You're the only one I trust to carry on this legacy. Not because you're my biological daughter, but because you're the only one who truly understands what this company was built on. Trust, not power. If they change the will, if you're removed from the position you earned, bring the original to my attorney, Virgil. He'll know what to do. Don't be afraid to fight, Avery. And never believe you're alone. I love you. Dad. I sat in silence for a long time inside that old house, the envelope resting on my lap. Then I opened the USB and plugged it into my laptop. A video file appeared. My father, sitting in this very room, his eyes a little tired, but his voice steady. Avery. He looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, then things didn't go as I hoped. But you're stronger than all of them combined. Don't let them take what you bled to build, and never confuse power with character. A person can buy everything, except integrity. I sat there, still, as the wind rustled the pines outside, realizing this wasn't over. Someone had tried to bury this will, but my father had outmaneuvered them. I carefully placed all the documents back into the bag, locked the oak box, and stood up. I looked around the house one more time. It wasn't just a place filled with memories. It had become the starting point of something much bigger. Something they couldn't stop. Not with lies, not with money, and definitely not with a forged will. I didn't return to Boston immediately after finding the will. Instead, I stayed at the Lakehouse for another night, surrounded by the sound of wind rustling through the old pine trees and the scent of damp wood lingering in the air. The house carried my mother's presence. Quiet, subtle, yet filled with a warmth that made it hard to leave right away. I spent the whole evening sitting on the wooden floor, watching the video my father recorded, rewinding and replaying each moment, trying to memorize every expression, every slow nod, every heavy look that I had been too busy with work to notice before. Avery, if anything happens to me, and if Elaine interferes, this is my final promise to you, he said, looking into the camera, with a voice steady but as still as a stone sinking to the bottom of a lake. You're the only one who understands why this company was built, not for fame, not for power, but for family. For the future your mother and I once dreamed of. Don't let anyone erase that. I sat motionless, eyes stinging. Something inside me, long suppressed, rose fiercely. It wasn't pain or anger anymore. It was the awareness that I could no longer allow others to decide my life based on a false version of the truth. I held the original will in my hands. I had clear proof. And, above all, I had myself. With all the years I had devoted to the company they were twisting every day. The next morning, I woke early, stepped onto the porch, and took a deep breath of the crisp air flowing across the lake. The water was still, reflecting the pale gray sky like a mirror of the past. I touched the wooden doorframe, locked everything up, then carefully placed the wooden box holding the documents into the trunk of my car. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Not to look back, but to make sure I was leaving with a clear purpose. I didn't go straight to Virgil's law office. Instead, I drove around to the Southern Warehouse District, where the company once housed its production department before Elaine dissolved it to optimize costs. I knew there was someone I needed to see first. Frank, the longtime warehouse manager who had worked with my father since the early days. He was the quiet type, but once he trusted someone, he wouldn't easily turn his back. I called from the parking lot, voice low. "It's me, Avery. I need to see you, now." Less than 10 minutes later, he opened the heavy steel door, eyes surprised but asking no questions. I stepped into the small office behind rusted shelves and set the box on the desk. "I found this at the Lakehouse," I said, gently opening the lid. Frank looked down at the will silently. I didn't need to say more. He read the title, then nodded slowly. "I knew there had to be another version. The one they revealed at the funeral wasn't the real signature." I looked up at him, surprised. "You suspected?" He nodded. "Your dad came here a few weeks before he passed. He seemed worried, said if anything went wrong, I should contact Virgil. But then he died so suddenly. I didn't know what to do." I placed the USB next to the will. "Can you keep a copy for me, just in case something happens to me on the road?" Frank frowned. "What do you think might happen?" I was silent for a moment. Elaine is not a simple person, and Jade knows no limits. If they know I have proof, they won't sit still. He carefully took the documents, placed them in the safe behind him, then turned to me. "Your dad trusted you. Don't let him down." I left the warehouse shortly after, my mind spinning with next steps. My phone rang as I entered the highway. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Avery Monroe?" a polite male voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "I'm from Virgil's office. He wants to see you urgently. A woman named Elaine Spencer contacted this morning, requesting changes to the inheritance documents." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Tell him I'll be there within an hour, and tell him not to touch anything until I arrive." I hung up and accelerated. Elaine was trying to erase traces, but now it was too late. My father once placed his trust in honesty. I place mine in preparation. And I have both. I stepped out of Virgil's office with the leather bag tightly in my hand, inside the original will my father had hidden, along with the copy I made right after returning from the Lakehouse. He looked at me long before placing his hand on the documents and nodding silently. He understood. I didn't need to take the matter to court. Not yet. I wanted something else. A path they couldn't predict. That night, in my small apartment, the desk lamp cast a soft yellow glow over scattered papers. I wrote the first ideas by hand. Not PowerPoint, not email. Just pen and paper. It felt like drawing the first rough lines of a new life. A new company. A path that didn't rely on family power or a seat handed down behind closed doors. A place for people like me. Overshadowed. Manipulated. By family. By the board. By those who think their signature is worth more than real value. I gave the project a tentative name. Clearline Legal Collective. Not flashy, not grand. Just a straight, clear line. Just the way I always believed justice should be served. I called some old partners, not those who bowed to Elaine or shook hands with Jade, but CFOs, mid-level CEOs who once invited me to lunch and texted me asking about contract terms. People who knew I wasn't just the boss's daughter. "Avery? I thought you left the industry," a man named Douglas, a longtime Monroe Holdings client, said, surprised when I reached out. "I just changed my position. Now I work independently. And I remember you said you wanted to split from your wife's family shareholders. But couldn't find a trustworthy advisor?" He chuckled softly. "You do remember. Okay, send me your plan details. If it makes sense, I'll be the first to sign." 3 days later, I had my first client. A week later, a small furniture company in Portland reached out, after hearing I was suspiciously removed from Monroe Holdings. You defended us in that contract with the Chinese materials firm last year, the CEO said over Zoom. You understand how big players operate, but you never weaponize that to bully the weaker. We trust you. I sat up straight, feeling that I was being called by my real name, in my real role, without the shadow of Elaine or Jade hanging over me. I rented a small room in a shared workspace in South End. No walnut desks, no Italian leather chairs like Monroe Holdings had, but good light, friendly receptionists, and most importantly, no one knew whose daughter I was. They only knew me as a self-made lawyer, starting over, carrying 2 laptops, a stack of client files, and a caution honed by pain. Lucy, my best friend from college, was the first to step into my new office. She looked around and said, I can't believe you've done all this in just 2 weeks. Remember when we dreamed of opening our own law firm back in sophomore year? I smiled, setting down my coffee cup. Back then, it was just a dream. Now, it's real life. Lucy lowered her voice. So the will you use it? I looked at her, shaking my head. Not yet. I don't need it to take back what was once mine. I want them to see I rebuilt everything from zero, and none of them get to stand by and claim a share. I worked from dawn to late night, drafting contracts, sending emails, building the website, designing the logo, answering every small client question. But every time someone sent back a reply saying, "We agree to sign," I felt like I was laying the first brick of something that truly belonged to me. 3 weeks later, I got messages from some former Monroe Holdings employees. Jade fired the entire PR team. Rumor is they're restructuring again. Another wrote, heard Elaine wants to sell off shares. Can't keep cash flow going. I didn't respond to those messages. I saved them, closed my laptop, and turned back to a contract file for a small organic bakery company that was trapped by unfair terms from its distributor. As I stepped out of the office on a rainy Boston weekend afternoon, I stood under the awning watching the busy crowd rush by. I thought about my father, about the day he placed his hand on my shoulder in the company hallway and told me I was capable of great things. He didn't say, "If your mother were here." He didn't say, "If Elaine wasn't around." He just believed in me. And now, even without him, I keep moving forward, not to reclaim a title, but to build something no one can take away. A company with my name on it, run by me, guided by the values I believe in. I haven't won yet, haven't restored justice to the legacy they tried to fake. But I've started a new game, my own way. The first news came to me on a Monday morning while I was sitting with a group of clients at a small cafe in South End, presenting a model to protect intellectual property rights for small businesses. A message from Lucy popped up on my phone screen. Have you seen the news this morning? Monroe Holdings is involved in a major scandal. I didn't reply immediately. I finished my presentation, shook hands with each client, then opened my phone. On the front page of the Boston Ledger was a bold headline, "Explosive Media Scandal. Monroe Holdings accused of secret $1 million deal with Shell Company." I scrolled down, reading every line carefully. A $14 million contract funneled to an anonymous media firm, approved by none other than Jade Spencer herself. The contract listed numerous brand management media expenses, but there were no performance reports, no invoices. An insider source revealed that the entire sum was transferred overseas within 3 weeks after approval. That afternoon, I received a call from Claire, a TV reporter who had interviewed me at a small seminar 3 months before. "Miss Monroe, I'm working on a story about female-led businesses making strides after leaving large corporations. I'd like to interview you about your new company and your views on business transparency." I kept my tone calm. "I can share about my company, but I won't comment on Monroe Holdings." She hesitated, then smiled softly. "We'll let the audience draw their own conclusions." The filming took place right in my small office. Cameras, lights, technicians, all professional, but I didn't feel strange. I had faced other people's eyes my whole life. But today, I was no longer just a shadow behind the Monroe name. I was myself. Claire asked, "You were once a potential heir to one of the largest media conglomerates in the region, but now you lead a small company. Why?" I answered without scripting. "I choose what lets me sleep at night. For me, transparency isn't a strategy. It's a principle of survival." 2 weeks after the broadcast, I received a flood of emails from investors, small business owners, even senior advisors who had once worked with my father. Some of the most candid invitations I've ever heard on television. One email read, "I want to invest in your company." Meanwhile, Elaine suddenly became the focus of an independent investigation demanded by Monroe Holdings' largest shareholder. A leaked internal report revealed Elaine had transferred company welfare funds into her personal accounts to pay for personal PR activities, including Jade's wedding, jewelry, and image consulting for local politicians. One shareholder, once a strong supporter of Elaine after my father's death, filed a lawsuit in Massachusetts court accusing Elaine and the board of financial manipulation and embezzling over $20 million. I received a call from one of the company's former CFOs. His voice betrayed frustration. "Avery, you don't know how much I wished someone would stop this sooner. They replaced the entire internal audit system just to hide those expenses." I leaned back in my chair, voice low. "I know, but not everyone dares to speak up while they still can." The next message came from Lucy. She sent a clip from a leaked closed-door hearing that a TV station had just uncovered. In it, a former Jade employee confirmed she had requested contract edits after signing to conceal the timing of money being moved out of the contingency fund. Lucy called immediately after. "Did you hear that part where she said, 'I was just following orders from above'?" She means Elaine. Now they're starting to blame each other. I wasn't surprised. It was just happening faster than I expected. That same day, a financial newspaper ran a 3-page feature. Avery Monroe, the woman rising from the shadows, leading the wave to redefine business justice. The article traced my journey from legal director, pushed out of the company my father founded, to building an independent firm hailed as the most trusted partner for small businesses. Not a line was written by me, not a meeting arranged, but the story was told, and this time, it was the truth. No edits, no direction. The next day, I received a courier package with no sender's name. Inside were copies of internal meeting minutes between Jade and Elaine, along with a handwritten note. "If you still have the original will, it's time to use it." I placed my hand over the edge of the documents, feeling a quiet stillness, not because I awaited revenge, but because I knew their game was ending, and the hand holding the advantage was no longer theirs. That morning, I was reviewing a partnership contract with a supermarket chain in Denver when the receptionist called from downstairs. Her voice was hesitant. "Miss Monroe, 2 women are here, claiming to be family. They didn't make an appointment, but insist on seeing you immediately." I glanced at my schedule, spotting a free slot from 10 to 10:30. "Let them up," I said, then hung up, folded the contract and straightened my collar. I didn't need to guess who they were. The door opened after 3 light knocks. Elaine stepped in first, her appearance far from the polished woman who once chaired the board. Her designer coat was frayed at the edges, hair hastily pinned up, her face gaunt, eyes swollen beneath thin makeup. Behind her was Jade, red-eyed, clutching her jacket, walking not confidently but dragging as if battered by a storm. I didn't invite them to sit. I stood, gently closing the door behind them, then turned back to my chair. Elaine spoke first, her voice shaky and unlike the woman she used to be. "Avery, I know you're very busy, but please, just a few minutes, just a few." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "I think we have nothing left to say privately. If there's legal business to discuss, you should schedule with my lawyer." Elaine took a step forward, eyes downcast. The company is on the brink of bankruptcy. The major shareholders are pulling out. The government is investigating. I have no other choice. I'm here to ask for your help. Jade suddenly broke down crying. Not the kind of cry from a scolded child, but the choking sobs of someone utterly powerless. You don't understand. I didn't know it would collapse like this. I thought I was following Mom's plan. I just wanted to be recognized. I stood, my voice calm but firm enough to cut through the panic. Recognized? How much recognition do you want? Enough to sign fake contracts, funnel money through ghost accounts, then blame others when it all falls apart? Do you remember the day you sat in Dad's office, laughing at me when I lost access to the system? Elaine ran her hand nervously, stepped closer to the table and placed a stack of documents down. These are all the shares I still hold. I'm ready to transfer them to you. I know you have the will. If you want to sue, you'll win. But I'm asking you to think about the others, the employees still waiting for their paychecks, the families connected to the company since your dad was alive. Please save them. I looked down at the papers. No wax seal, no internal control stamps. This was a hastily printed share certificate, hastily signed. Worthless without trust. I lifted my head and looked Elaine straight in the eyes. Do you know what I went through to earn a place in that house? I studied, day and night, to finish college early. I was the only one brave enough to challenge during executive meetings while everyone else stayed silent. I worked 7 days a week, no holidays, no birthdays off. But when I begged for a position, just a seat at the conference table, you told me to learn gratitude. And now you come here, asking me for help? Elaine went still. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't sure if they were tears of regret or just fear. I lowered my voice, almost whispering, I begged for a place in my own family once, but not anymore. Jade rushed forward, dropping to her knees right in front of my desk. Sister Avery, please. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I don't want to lose everything. I'm scared. I bent down to look at her. Not the proud stepsister, but a broken person trembling under the weight of her own mistakes. I said nothing. I simply walked around the desk and opened the office door. You two can leave. Elaine hesitated. You don't want control. You don't want money. So what do you really want? I didn't turn back. I want what neither of you can give. Trust, reputation, integrity. Those are things I've built myself. And there's no room for either of you in that. Jade stood, unsteady, clutching her mother's shoulder. Together, they walked out the door. As they left, I looked around the office. The light streaming through the clear glass reflecting off the whiteboard where I'd been drafting a partnership rollout plan for the West Coast. I returned to my desk. That meeting hadn't made me hurt. It hadn't made me feel triumphant. It made me realize one thing. I had come far enough to know that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing others to repeat their mistakes. I opened my laptop again. There was work to do. And I had no time for those who once saw me as a barrier. Now, I am the straight line they cannot bend. I didn't sleep that night. After the confrontation with Elaine and Jade, the room seemed larger, but my mind was cramped with thoughts. The files Elaine left on the desk remained untouched. I didn't need them. What I needed wasn't control or shares. I had long given those up. Not because I lacked the strength to reclaim them, but because I wanted to build something bigger than all those disputes combined. I sat at my desk, reopening the original will, the only document I kept since leaving the Lakehouse. In the soft yellow light of the desk lamp, my father's signature stood clear, as if he was right there, placing a hand on my shoulder, waiting for something. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through contacts, and stopped at a familiar name, Virgil. He was probably still awake, as if he knew I would call. I've made up my mind, I said quickly before he could ask. I want to make the will public, but not for lawsuits or to claim anything back. Virgil was silent for a few seconds. Then he sighed gently. Your dad would be proud. I smiled, bittersweet. Not proud because I won, but because I chose to forgive without forgetting. 3 days later, I held a press conference in a small building on the east side of the city. The former Community Arts Center, now remodeled as the first headquarters of the Monroe Initiative. Outside, rain fell lightly, as if to preserve the solemn but dignified atmosphere. The media gathered in full, not for scandal anymore, but because they heard I was about to make a statement about the original will. The one the press had speculated about for months, but never confirmed. I stepped up to the podium, holding the paper in my hand, looking directly into the first row, where familiar and unfamiliar faces sat. I wasn't wearing designer clothes, no stiff collars or high heels like back at Monroe Holdings. I was just myself, a woman who had walked through loss, betrayal, and isolation to find what truly matters. I'm Avery Monroe, I began, my voice steady across the room. The only daughter of Daniel Monroe, and today, I'm not here to reclaim a company, assets, or a title. I'm here to share what my father left behind, not in money, but in trust. I raised the will, the one with the real signature, the seal, and legal confirmation. A few murmurs rippled through the room, camera flashes blinking rapidly, but I didn't stop. My father left me all his shares, with a note, if anything happens, use it wisely. And today, I choose not to use it to go back to my old position, but to create something new. I turned to the screen beside me, where a simple but meaningful logo appeared. The Monroe Initiative, empowering women to build from within. This will be a nonprofit organization, using the very legal assets I've received to help young women start businesses, especially those who were once looked down on by family or society, those forced out of opportunities simply because they didn't fit the mold. I took a deep breath. I was one of those women. I stood outside the door of my own company, begging for a place, and was refused. I was pushed out of the game simply because I didn't fit the role others had set. But I didn't make myself a victim. I chose to build a different playground, where women's voices don't have to ask permission to be heard. A round of applause followed, not loud, but definite. Among those seated, I saw Claire, the reporter who once interviewed me, nodding slowly, pen still in hand. After the press conference, I stepped off the stage, heading backstage when Virgil approached, holding an envelope. Your dad wrote this, asked me to keep it. Only to be opened if you make the will public. He handed it to me and stepped back. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short note. Avery, when you choose to stand up for something bigger than yourself, you prove you're stronger than everything your father built. Legacy isn't in assets, but in how you use them to change other lives. I held the note for a long time. No gold, no stock charts, just sincere words. The only thing I ever truly longed to hear from him. That afternoon, I sat in the first office of the Monroe Initiative, looking over the list of the first recipients to receive funding. There was a girl who was kicked out of her home for daring to refuse a family-imposed job. There was a single mother who was fired for reporting harassment. There was a law student waiting for a scholarship to finish her final year. I looked at them and saw parts of myself reflected. People who had been underestimated, forgotten, or pushed away from the path they had built, with sweat and tears. The will was no longer something to regain fairness just for me. It had become a symbol of recovery, of resilience, and of the journey of those who refuse to be defeated. And I felt I was no longer alone in that journey. One autumn morning, the Boston sky carried a gentle light, like a warm touch from the past. I walked slowly along the stone path leading into Elmwood Cemetery, holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums I had just bought from the familiar flower stand on the corner of Tremont Street. Yellow leaves covered the walkway, and the wind rustled through the oak trees, making the air fresh yet tinged with sadness. like a quiet soundtrack for a return full of deeper meaning than words could express. My mother's grave lay beside my father's, beneath a large tree where every summer we used to spread a picnic blanket, carrying sandwiches my mother made and soda cans my father would sneak into the cooler. The day my mother died, I wasn't old enough to understand what permanent loss meant. The day my father died, I was grown enough to know some apologies never come in time. But today, I didn't come to reclaim anything. I came to lay something down. Once and for all. I knelt, placed the bouquet into a small iron vase, adjusted a few tilted stems. Then I looked up, touching the cool stone engraved with the names of the two most important people in my life. One who gave me form, the other who gave me purpose. I didn't seek revenge, I whispered, my voice carried by the wind. I created something better from my loss, with my own hands, and with what you both left behind. Not possessions, but trust. Behind me, a few steps away, stood a new bronze plaque beside the path. Etched clearly were the words, "The Monroe Initiative, for women who dare to build." I had requested my mother's words be added, the phrase she repeated every time I fell. A strong woman doesn't ask for a place, she builds her own ground. Under that tree, I sat for a long time, closing my eyes to listen to the simple sounds of a morning. Leaves rustling, sparrows calling each other, the wind slipping through my sleeves. I thought of the girls who wrote thank you letters for receiving startup funding, the women who teared up after workshops because it was the first time they felt truly heard. I thought of Maya, a 19-year-old girl kicked out for daring to pursue technology, who has now built a STEM foundation for rural girls. They are the reason I keep going. Meanwhile, across the city, Jade was preparing for her preliminary trial. The press reported she was charged with forging financial documents, using company assets for personal gain, and bribing the accountant to cover up wrongdoing. Her defense lawyers kept delaying, but the evidence was overwhelming. Elaine disappeared from the radar after being denied entry at the Canadian border. Rumors circulated she used a fake identity to buy a train ticket to Europe, but nothing confirmed yet. Whatever happens, I know she won't be the one manipulating anyone anymore. They had their chance to stop. But they chose to continue lying until there was no way back. I don't feel satisfaction in their downfall. Honestly, I feel peace. Because I understand that sometimes justice doesn't come with a judge's gavel, but with the silent, steady perseverance of someone who refuses to be a victim. My phone buzzed softly, a message from Lucy. She just called to say thanks. I sent over the new contract. Our team is planning to open another branch in Seattle. Just like you said, this model can scale. I smiled. Lucy, my friend who never turned her back, who believed in me from the day I only had an empty desk in a shared office. And now, we're writing together what neither of us ever dared to believe would really come true. I stood up, brushed the dust off my coat, and touched my parents' grave one last time. I will be back, I whispered. But next time I might bring a few young women with me. Those learning to stand strong, just like Mom taught me. They need to see this. They need to see that a woman can leave a legacy without asking permission. I walked slowly out of the cemetery, the wind playing with my hair, carrying the crisp chill of early fall and the scent of damp earth. Each step pulled me out of the darkness, not to forget, but to step into the light, with what I have preserved, chosen, and built from all that once caused me pain. And that, I believe, is the true victory, a victory that needs no applause but is enough to let me stand firm in this life, without anyone holding me up, because I am no longer a shadow in someone else's family. I am Avery Monroe, my mother's daughter, and now I have become the woman she always believed I could be. I don't know how you feel hearing this. Maybe you've experienced being pushed out of your own family. Maybe you've stood at the crossroads of revenge or moving on. Or maybe you're at the stage I once was, not knowing where to start when everything seems to have fallen apart. But if there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's this. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to defeat others, but to refuse to be the version they assigned to you. To choose to rise and create a new path. Even if at first, only you believe in it. What do you think of the choice I made? What would you do if you were in my place? I really want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Not just to share, but maybe to be a support for someone who needs encouragement right now. And if you want to hear more true stories about family, choices, and how people find themselves again in seemingly hopeless situations, hit subscribe. New journeys are waiting for you ahead.